What you are looking at here, folks, is a TV show that was done over 20 years ago about some trouble I got into, and it's in two parts. It was in November of 1997, and two consecutive nights, and the title of the story was Stolen Identity, and I'm the one that stole the identity. So I ended up going to being railroaded to prison for this, for something I really didn't do to the extent of what they made it look like. A little bit of background. I was getting credit for over like 8 years. I was getting credit, and I was using false information for some of the credit. But the credit that I got, I was paying it every month. I kept files and all. Can you imagine? They show it too. And they said I would get a card in my name. Well, if I got a card in my name and I'm paying the bills every month, does it look like I'm trying to defraud the government? What happened was they broke into our home with battering rams and guns drawn the Postal Service. And I was outside moving the car at the time. I didn't know. When I came back, I said, why didn't they wait till they saw me leave. Why didn't they wait till I come back? And my wife was in the bedroom, and they woke her up. And one of the postal agents put a gun right to her head. She's screaming and all. When I got there, I calmed her down, you know. They had a female postal agent. I called her Jane Doe postal agent. So she was there, and I don't know, it was about 5 of them. They had a search warrant. And they were there over 4 hours in the house looking for what? A computer? I didn't have a computer, first of all. They thought it was some kind of ringleader. I was just a person that worked every day and bothered nobody. And I had no intention of doing that. I started a few cards when we first went together to get some credit, you know. We needed it, and we got credit. And then I decided if I could get more credit, and then I start using information just to see. You know, it wasn't to try to pull any scheme or trick or anything like that. So what happened was, I kept getting credit, and I couldn't pay it. And I was trying to pay it, so I was trying to get credit to pay credit. And I was hopefully that later on maybe I could build up our credit and then maybe get a loan. You know, and I could pay it off and then just have one big payment, but wasn't working out that way, you know. So, but imagine over 8 years, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I think it was one of the banks that was involved. I think they contacted the Postal Service because, you know, I used the mail to mail the applications, and they noticed that I had more than one card with that bank. I had 2 cards with that bank and 2 names, but my name was on both of them. So what does that tell you? And my address and my phone number and everything. But it wasn't the false information that got me in trouble. It was the true information. So I'm going to explain a little bit more here what you're going to look at. So I was going to show you this first, but if I do, you might not understand it. So my wife, before she passed away, she wrote 3 stories about us. The first book was book 1. It was Real Diamond. And in that story, she shows how they broke in the house and all. She mentions it. And book 2 was Railroad to Prison. She's showing how I got in that trouble and how she proved that I was railroaded to prison. And then book 3 was The Electronic Criminal. Was this guy I was working with. He knew all about what was going on, and he decided to come up with some kind of embezzlement there, embezzle money from where we worked at the video store. And what am I going to do? He's going to make me my scapegoat? Make me his scapegoat? Well, I found out about it, but afterward, and I ended up setting him up. And I had his confession on tape, and that cleared me in the store. But Marie mentions this in all the, in all the books. So the first book, book 1, Real Diamond, when we met, I got her, I wrote a song for Neil Diamond, and he wasn't taking outside material, so I decided to take those lyrics and make it come to life. So I saved up $20,000, and I bought a real diamond ring. It was a beauty, a big one, and I had to find the girl of my dreams to give it to. And I didn't seem to find anybody, Finally, a friend of the family introduced me to Marie, and I went to her place and started fixing things for her. And she kept calling me then, because we lived close by, and we used to go out and go places and all. And I took her over to meet my mother, and she went and saw my garden in the backyard. And she asked me about the plants, and I said, about some of the plants, and I said, I'll tell you later. So that night in bed, she said, now, Frankie, explain to me what those plants were. She said, I have an idea. I said, they're pot plants. He said, what are you growing pot plants for? I said, I was trying to graft a pot plant with a tomato plant, but it wasn't working. Because they're similar, they're green and all. And so she said, well, I don't care what you were trying to do. We got to get rid of them. So we got rid of all the plants and all. And everything was all right after that. And that's what made me give her the real diamond ring. Because she found out about my secret garden, and she helped me, and she kept me from being in trouble, and she stuck by me. So I figured, well, she's the one. So in the song that I had written, and we went to the restaurant, and then there was, I don't want to go into it too much because you can just read the stories, listen to them on the audio books I did. So what happened was they broke in our house, and I ended up pawning the real diamond ring so she could stay there, pay the rent for the whole year and all that. They didn't know nothing about that real diamond. The police, or the Postal Service, when they broke in, they probably would have taken it, but they didn't know about it. So that shows you they didn't know about the other stuff either, because when they broke in, they had a search warrant, but they only wanted to have the computer, and I had no computer then. It's over 20 years ago. I have a computer now. I just recently, where I worked, I had a computer, but it was only for the store. So back to the stories, and I pawned the real diamond, got, everything paid. When I came back out, I ended up paying it off. It took me a while, and I kept it. So, and that's in book 1. And then in book 2, about this railroad to prison, she proves it, and she lets, you decide from when you listen to the story of how it was with the public defender and how I signed a plea bargain and all that. And how, in other words, they're treating me like, well, this is going to show here in this documentary that I'm going to show, this 2-part thing on stolen identity. It's going to show you, where I worked. It's going to show that the files and all I had. So that tells you right there. If I didn't have those files, they wouldn't have been able to get a case. They used those files. They wouldn't have known all the credit that I had over 8 years. So, but before I show this, I wanted to make sure that you understand. Now, this electronic criminal, that guy, he was my friend, Marie called him my Huckleberry friend. And he was good. He was a good worker and everything. But when I found out what he was doing, I didn't even know how he did it. It wasn't being detected either, because in those days, a point-of-sale terminal, that was something that was different. It was on the phone line. Like, he would take and punch in credit card numbers, I don't know if it's his mother's, and then he would, say, put in $8,000 sale, right? And he would return it to his debit card or Visa, whatever he had, and then he would settle it. So, no, he would get an approval. He would get, how he was doing it. Yeah, he would get an approval. He forced the sale. So you're supposed to call up and have them, verify it. And give you a 6-digit code. He just made up a 6-digit code. He punched it in. It went through. And he was getting the money, went into his account. So he got like $46,000 altogether. Imagine from a small business like that, getting $46,000. He told me about it at the end, and I couldn't figure exactly how he did it, but that's what he was doing. So he was settling, at the end of the day, he did settlement. So he would put the bogus sales in, and then charge it back to his account, and then it would be zero. And so that's how he was doing it. But it didn't get detected, I think, because the way that it was debit then, and it wasn't so like it is nowadays. See, we called him an electronic criminal. Today he would have been a cyber criminal. He could have sat at home in front of the computer just like I'm doing now, and telling you this stuff. And so there's the 3 stories that she wrote. So it'll be explained, when you can listen to the stories. I did 3 audio books. What happened was when we were writing all these 3 stories, she told me to get 3 copybooks, Frankie. I said, okay. She said, I divided our life into three stories. I said, okay, it was all right. When she gave me the titles, I knew those titles, that, you know, what each meant. And then what she did was, she gave me the titles, book 1, book 2, book 3, and then she gave me all the chapters for each book. I said, wow, and she didn't write nothing down. I guess she just wanted to get that down, and she knew when we started to write. So, chapter 1, right? I gave her the chapter. She said, write this all down, you know, for the story. And then chapter. It took over a year, I know. Do a little bit every day. So finally, when the 3 books were completed, I said to myself, I got all these 3 copybooks full of the story, you know, our life story. And I looking at it, looked like a lot of chicken scratch. You know, I could read it. There was a lot of corrections and all. So finally I decided, you know what, let me read it off of there onto a DVD, and I could put extras and everything else. And so that's what I did. I did 3 discs. Didn't take me too long, you know, but it came out all right. That's what you're going to be listening to. When you look up online here, you're going to hear the 3 stories. It's all in there. So the first one is Real Diamond. You can look up Real Diamond, you can look up Railroad to Prison, and you can look up the Electronic Criminal. It'll come up on YouTube by those titles, and then you can just listen to it. It's all 3 stories, the whole thing. So you'll know more about it, because this here makes me look like, when you listen to this, it's short, you know, like I'm a criminal. I don't know what you want to call it. I didn't get in trouble, and plus, while all this was going on, you know, all the years and all, I was still working the same. We were doing everything the same. I didn't get a car. I didn't get a house. Nothing. I used the money to buy things. But most of the money is being used to pay back the other cards. And plus all the interest they charged and everything. So they made me look like a career criminal here. And a bank robber. A bank robber? A bank robber, because it was $200,000, which wasn't supposed to be. That's where the railroad to prison comes in. They took everything that we ever owed in our whole life, both of us, when it was only supposed to take, they weren't supposed to take anything in my name and her name, which was like about $60,000. So then it wouldn't have been enough to make me go to prison, because that's the guidelines. If it's under $200,000, I wouldn't have been. It would have been probation or home confinement or what? No. That's why I say about being railroaded to prison for that. So you'll find out. I mean, Marie did a good job with the 3 stories. I don't, you know, it's not like it's going to be on the New York Times bestseller list, but at least they're good stories. They're true stories, you know, and I'm still around to, you know, to verify everything. I'm going to start this up now. And it's not too long, and then when it ends, I'll shut it off. I'm going to see if I can do this now.
If you're like most people, you would assume that your name and your personal history are yours alone. But an Action News investigation has found that crooks are ready to steal both right out from under you. Action News reporter Michelle McCormack has an inside look at how such a scheme works.
What happened was, I think it was like an evil twin.
And that's how Frank Leeper describes an 8-year spending spree, charging over $200,000 on over 80 credit cards. Accounts he opened using other people's names. People like Julia Feinman.
That was really frightening to me, that my own biographical information had been altered.
Information Feinman and other victims left at this Philadelphia video store where Frank Leeper worked and was still working at the time of the sentencing in federal court. The key was obtaining a copy of Feinman's driver's license and her social security number.
People don't seem to protect their information, I don't think. It's not that made it easy for me. It wasn't that. I mean, I did have the authority to where I worked at to that information at the time. So I used it for my own sake at the time, but the intent wasn't really there for me to do any wrong to anybody.
In many cases, Leeper's name was on the account, along with the unsuspecting victims like Feinman. He would eventually get his own account in his own name. but damage to credit ratings had already been done.
It could come back to haunt me 15 years from now when someone looks at my credit report.
And for this paper trail of destruction, Leeper will serve 14 months in prison. If he had robbed a bank of $200 grand, it would have been at least 5 years.
One is a crime of violence, which is going to be punished more severely. But when you have this many credit cards run up, the violation is almost the same. It takes people years to get their lives back together.
But not all identity thieves operate the same way as Frank Leeper. Many steal pre-approved credit reports found in the garbage or discarded hospital and bank forms. And in the Delaware case of Roger Cullen and his wife, the Who's Who of America book found in your local library.
Should try to find somebody that was like 5 years younger or maybe 3, 4 years older.
The Cullens didn't share an account with the person. They actually became that person. They would get Social Security numbers from motor vehicle departments and copies of birth certificates, then obtain driver's licenses in other states with their own photos. Although most of their fraud was through department store credit cards and bank accounts, as Roger explained in this police interrogation, he even used an alias for a drunk driving arrest.
We just snapped. We just went nuts. We went crazy. What can I tell you? We knew we were doing wrong, but we snapped.
The paper trail of the Cullens crisscrossed the country, and by using so many aliases, they were virtually impossible to catch. It was a license plate number that led the Delaware State Police to the Cullens. Almost a decade and tens of thousands of dollars later, their luck had run out. Michelle McCormack, Channel 6 Action News.
Well, the Cullens may have been caught, but the work is just beginning for their victims who have to try to repair their credit. Now, tomorrow night at 11, Michelle's special report continues with advice how to keep from becoming a victim of stolen identity. Your identity, they belong to you, right? Well, an Action News special report has uncovered thieves who could be stealing your good name and using it for their profit. In part 2 of our special report, Michelle McCormack has tips on how you can keep your identity yours.
I had given thought to it, and I thought it happened to other people, but it didn't happen to me.
But because attorney Julia Feinman had good credit, solid income, it made her an ideal target for identity theft. The information lifted from a video rental application by Frank Leeper, who worked at the store. Julia never knew what was happening until years later when she just happened to check her credit report.
The victims can't rely upon the system to protect them. They have to take the necessary steps themselves to try to protect themselves.
Protection that begins in your pocketbook, as these Delaware State Police detectives showed me after spending just seconds looking through my wallet.
You've given everything away with those 2 documents, your driver's license, your Social Security number.
In fact, whenever you can, you should leave your Social Security card at home and hidden. And before you throw out your mail, rip it up. That way you've destroyed any Social Security numbers or other account numbers that could easily be lifted by a criminal who goes dumpster diving. New Jersey-based Sensor sees a future without letters or numbers. It's developed iris identification and claims it's virtually foolproof.
0 false accepts. False reject rate is a little, you can live with that because, if you turn somebody down, it's not pleasant, but if you turn somebody incorrectly down, that's not so bad. And our false reject rate is very low. It's less than 2%.
And a British company named BTG has developed a system to verify your signature. The system is so secure that the people who guard it have the veins in their hands checked to protect access to the database. But everyday use, some fear, is a ways off.
And the merchants out there aren't equipped to be able to read this type of information.
So in the meantime, it's up to you. And regardless of how guarded you are with your personal information, a credit report each year is the best way to make sure.
People really, really, really can't be too careful.
And if you don't want to take her word for it, just ask the man who stole her name and charged thousands of dollars for years.
I never intended to harm anyone during this whole thing. I would like to really help as many people as I could, but I think the best thing is just checking your own credit. That's the best thing you can do.
Michelle McCormack, Channel 6 Action News.
And